From the southeastern corner of western North Carolina, this is Folklore. I'm your host, James Hernishin. This episode, along with the next two, was actually recorded 3 weeks ago, but I delayed posting it until now because I didn't think listening to podcasts was high on most folks' agenda, given the events since then. Plus, internet access is still a problem in many parts of this county as we work our way back to normal after Tropical Storm Helene. The clock of the election is ticking, though, with early voting scheduled to begin October 17th. So it's time to start getting back in election mode. In the 22 election for NC House District 113, Republican Jake Johnson, running for his second full term, received 20,267 votes, which was 100% of them, because the Democratic Party of North Carolina couldn't find anyone to run against him. 2 years before that, Johnson, who was running for his first full term after being appointed to replace disgraced GOP Representative Cody Henson, drew 30,367 votes against 20,596 for Transylvania businessman Sam Edney. The results in both years, in the district and in Polk County specifically, were pretty consistent, with the Republican candidate taking about 60% of the vote. So it's easy to see why it might be hard for the Democrats to scare up someone to bother running, given the long odds against winning. The state has been gerrymandered so fiercely that few seats are genuinely competitive. 2 years ago, of the 170 state House and Senate races, the Democrats ran a candidate in just 126. Abandoning the rest to the Republicans, and ours is one of those 44 seats. This time, though, the Democrats have left only 2 seats for the GOP to keep without a fight. And the challenger for District 113 is Flat Rock's Michelle Antalec. Whether or not you share her politics, you have to respect her willingness to mount a challenge. And even if she doesn't win your vote, she at least deserves your gratitude for giving you a choice on the ballot. Because without a choice, democracy isn't good for much. She met me at the Saluda Library a few days before the rains hit. Michelle Antalec, welcome to Folklore.
Hi, James. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you.
The first thing we should do is let you introduce yourself to the listeners because you're not that much of a known quantity in Polk County anyway. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you came to the position of running for State House.
Well, I have been active in politics for many years, starting even as a small child. But what really I have done in the last 10 years is I've been a precinct chair for 3 times, three tours of duty. I was first vice chair for Henderson County and chair for Henderson County. And the reason that I came to running for the House for District 113 is because I really wanted representation for this district. And I felt like we were not having that happen for us, and a lot of things that were happening out of the legislature were not something that we really wanted. And our district was being represented by someone that was doing things totally opposite of what I wanted, and I know most of my friends and people that I had talked to want.
Hey, what about your background, though? What do you do when you're not worried about politicians not representing us?
I've recently retired, okay. I was in risk management, and I worked for a multinational company, and so I have had an opportunity to see a lot of different things over my career. I started as a commercial loan officer, worked through that, went into corporate lending, and then ended up at the holding company level working with risk management, which is a way of ensuring that the shareholders are protected. It's very similar to a regulatory position in that you're there to make sure things are done the correct way.
Well, that sounds like a skill that might be applicable to the legislature.
Well, I have a few other skills along that same lines. I have an undergraduate degree in political science. I was a Senate intern, so I have a real good feel for how legislation actually gets done and how hard it is to get that done sometimes, and how hard you have to work at making alliances with other people, especially those across the aisle, which has seemed to be very hard to do in the past few years in the environment that we're working in politically. I also have a master's in finance, which gives me the opportunity to really understand budgeting and how we actually finance our state and how our taxation works. And the overall, I have an overall good understanding of finance and budgeting. Also, I taught. So
In school.
in school, I taught in a community college, and I taught business law and finance. And I did that as an adjunct professor, meaning that I was just part-time. I also had a full-time job, and I just did that basically as public service. So I realized exactly what some of these teachers are facing because I was very lucky and I was in an environment that was not as restrictive and really allowed me to reach out to my students on the community college level.
Well, education is certainly a big deal for a lot of people in Polk County and across the whole state, because I don't think I'm going way out of line by saying the Republican Party that controls the legislature has a specific agenda regarding public education. Dollars per pupil spent, we're certainly in the bottom third. We're close to, I think South Carolina beats us in a few, but other than that, we're pretty much at the bottom of the list, even in the South. And if you believe that that's a good thing, then fine. But I think in Polk County, because we don't have any charter or private schools, public education is a pretty big deal. You brought that up. Is that because that's one of the motivating reasons for why you wanted to see if you could replace Jake Johnson?
Absolutely. Our education system needs to be top notch, and we don't need to be taking dollars away to support private schools, parochial schools from the public schools, because a lot of students go through school, and high school is their last formal education. And so we need to do the very best job we can for those people, not only because they're not going to go on maybe and do more education formally, but even though for those that are going to do more education formally, so they have a better chance at getting in the schools they want to get in and come prepared. Just because you get to go to college, if you're not prepared for that, you may not get to stay. And here you've got, maybe you have debt, maybe you don't, maybe your parents do. It's a big obligation once you start college. And I think it's our obligation as the state of North Carolina, which is a great state, to provide students the kind of education they need. And right now we're just taking money out of the public school system, and we're making it very hard for people to stay in the teaching role. I don't know a lot of really young people that are sitting there going, I want to be a teacher now because my pay is low. I don't have the benefits I used to have. I'm being restricted very heavily by the state legislature. And it's a hassle. And people are leaving in droves. And that's unfortunate because to me, teaching is a calling.
Well, it would have to be, considering how little it's paid.
Exactly. I mean, I loved teaching, but I couldn't teach full time. It wouldn't pay enough to make the ends meet. And I was just, it was like public service for me. And I took my time because I believed in it. And I think that's what a lot of teachers do. They believe in educating students. They like working with children. They like providing them with the knowledge they're going to need to go forward and become adults. And it's not something you go into to make a lot of money. You just don't.
There's a lot of things that you don't do for money. Some people would argue our society's all upside down. The really valuable things are not where you make the money.
Right.
And a state legislature is also not a position that pays a heck of a lot.
No.
And because you're retired, that gives you a little bit of flexibility. You don't have to try to juggle your state legislator obligations with another work. Okay, so we've dealt with education. That's obviously a big motivating factor. What else drove you to make this decision that you wanted to tackle, which is an uphill challenge?
It is definitely an uphill challenge, but I felt people, including me, needed an opportunity to make a choice, and a choice that was very, very, very diametrically opposed. Okay. Yes, I am a Democrat. I believe in helping people, and I feel like that the state, when it needs to, should be there to help. I don't think that's what is happening in our legislature right now. I think we're doing a lot of things that people in general that are out here as the constituency and the voters in the state of North Carolina don't want. They want things to be a lot more open and easy for the people that live here and less restrictive.
Can you be more specific about the less restrictive?
Less restrictive number. Well, I have to say this, that women's health care has become too restrictive.
Well, certainly distance women have to drive to seek reproductive health care.
Exactly. And it's health care. That's what people keep forgetting. It's not birth control per se. It can be in some cases, but mostly it's health care, because women that are pregnant have a lot of problems. It's not just a breeze, and they need to be able to access an emergency room or a doctor and get the kind of care they need. I mean, I have not heard of anybody having trouble getting care necessarily here in this area, in my district, but I can tell you that I hear it all the time from other people, where women that are pregnant, maybe miscarried, maybe had an ectopic pregnancy or whatever. There's a myriad of things that can go wrong, many things that can go wrong. And they need health care. They don't need to be waiting in the parking lot until they're so sick that it's nearly impossible for them to recover, or maybe still go ahead and have other children, because most people want their children. They really want them. So many have tried so hard. And things like IVF.
In vitro fertilization.
Exactly. That is a way for so many families to have a family that they want. And that doesn't need to be restricted by anybody.
Do you anticipate that might become a problem in North Carolina?
I would say, given what I've seen on 2025, that's on its way.
You were talking about Project 2025.
2025.
Somewhat unofficial guide to what President Trump would do if he got to be president again.
Right, exactly. And what I see is, I see my opponent going down that same 2025 path with the type of legislation that he's helped introduce and co-sponsor in the state of North Carolina. A lot of it has to do with the school system. And if you look at 2025, it also talks about having a national voucher program. And that will really kill the schools.
Yeah, mathematically, it's hard to avoid the conclusion that public schools will be hard hit if we go whole hog on the voucher system.
Exactly. And someplace like this district doesn't have many options for private schools or parochial schools, but that doesn't really matter as long as you have money going out of the school system, so it's not there to be utilized for the students that are there. And the voucher system, this is my understanding of it, really was to kind of help level people's ability to go to certain schools. Well, that has not really happened. And what's happened is people with higher tiers, I think the tiers are 1 through 4 in income level, that qualify for the voucher program. And what happens is, it's not tier 1 and 2 that are really utilizing that voucher program. Now, of course, this doesn't really apply to us because we don't have that many options. But it's really to the higher tiers of income, tiers 3 and 4, that are utilizing that. And that was never what it was meant for. And some of the legislation that my opponent has been a party to is also made it easier for people to get into the voucher system.
I'm not planning on interviewing Jake Johnson this election cycle, because I talked to him back in the primary, before the primaries, and I don't think a heck of a lot has changed. So we talked about things like introduction of partisan school boards in Polk County, and the loss of our municipal elections in off years, and splitting of Polk County in 2 for congressional districts. So those, I think, are the type of things you were referring to earlier when you said things are happening in our district that nobody wants.
Exactly.
So we can sum up by saying you're not convinced Jake Johnson is representing the interests of the district right now.
I would say that's a very succinct way of putting it. He's not representing our wants and needs and what we would like to see happen for the citizens of our district.
One thing that has changed since December, when Jake and I talked, was the fuss over our gubernatorial candidates. The Republican, Mark Robinson. As we're talking, it's a big deal that he lost almost his entire campaign staff, and Jake has actually aligned himself with Mark Robinson. Have you got? Does that factor into your campaign strategy at all?
As I said earlier, I think there is a very big difference between what I represent and what Jake represents. And him aligning himself with Mark Robinson is a decision that he made knowing a lot about the man and his lack of character and moral guidance. And more, there's nothing I can say that makes what I've heard from Mark Robinson and what's been reported and verified about Mark Robinson okay with me. I do not believe that the Holocaust was hooey. I think it happened. I think many people suffered mightily and lost their lives. And to not believe that that occurred, to me, kind of shows that we maybe need better history in our schools. People really need to understand how devastating that was for the world and the people that were harmed and hurt. That didn't happen. Well, that's not true. There's pictures, there's history, there's people who watched their family die. They can all tell you every bit about it. And he's ignoring that.
Mark or Jake?
Mark. But if Jake is aligning himself with Mark, it casts a wide shadow.
And yet, this district and Polk County in particular, very, very heavily Republican leaning. So even if you were to win, what do you think a Democrat as a member of the minority party in the state legislature can accomplish?
Well, as I said earlier, I was a Senate intern. I have a very good understanding of how hard it is to get legislation passed, especially when you're trying to go across state lines. I mean, party lines. I think what it is you have to meet people where you have common ground. If I'm elected, I represent everybody. I don't say, I can only help you because you're a Democrat. As long as you're in my district, I'm going to help you do whatever you need done and try to put forth the type of legislation that you feel is necessary for this district to make this district as successful and good to live in as it always has been. So I do believe that you have to build up relationships and you have to meet people where you do have common ground, because you're not going to have common ground about everything. There are lots of people like a Liz Cheney, okay? Liz Cheney and I wouldn't agree on much of anything, except that we have a belief in the rule of law, our Constitution, and democracy. And she puts that forth, but her policies, probably not. So I think that you can work with people that you don't agree with. You just have to be sure that you find what you do agree about and what you can work with.
Well, it sounds like a reasonable strategy for being a politician. It's just that this state has been, since about 2012 or so, run by the Republicans, and there's not been a heck of a lot of attempts to do across the aisle legislating. So what kind of bills would you try to get passed?
We need to improve teacher pay. We need to reestablish master's pay for teachers. We need to make sure that the voucher program at some point sunsets. These are the kinds of things that are going to make a difference for us. We need to look at our environmental issues that we have that the state may control. There's money that can be spent on the schools, and it needs to be spent on the schools. And yes, it's going to be hard to work across the aisle, but I believe that there are other people out there that think the same thing I do, that certain things deserve more money, more funding, more attention than they've been getting, and I can work with them on that. It may take me a while. And I'm not saying that I'm going to be a fireball on the first day, but I'm sure going to try, because that's what I was sent for. I'm not sent there to have a career. I'm sent there to be a public servant and represent this district.
Fair enough. What can we do as a district to make it clear in Raleigh that we're not keen on having things changed, the way we govern ourselves, the way we run our school boards? It just seems that there is a one-way transmission of information from Raleigh to the counties, basically telling us this is what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the partisan school board thing, I mean, it took everybody by surprise. It started off as a bill for one county, and then other counties kept on getting added, including Polk County. And then Buncombe County was added too, but in the reverse, right?
Exactly.
So you don't get to be partisan, and that's
Exactly.
obvious why that's happening. Other than, call up our state rep and our state senator and say, hey, we're kind of, PO'd about this. Even outside your role as a future state legislator, what can we do? It just seems like everyone just throws up their hands and says, well, we wrote a letter to Jake Johnson and he just said it was a good idea.
Well, this is the thing. You have to lobby to get your message across sometimes. And that may well mean making appointments with various parts of the other legislative body in the same area, not just this district, but other areas, and say, listen, this is what we really need to see. There's nothing wrong with calling up the governor's office and saying, I would like an appointment with what I hope is Josh Stein, and say, I'd like to talk to Governor Stein about this because it's very important for our area. And let people know what really you care about, because I don't think we've been represented adequately. And that's why you all are throwing up your hands, because who we've got right now says, oh, that's okay. That sounds good, but he doesn't go forward with it. And it takes a real fighter, somebody who understands exactly what people want accomplished and will fight and work as hard as it takes, because that's what this job's about. It's not making a career for yourself. It's not going up the chain of the state legislature. It's representing the people that sent you there. And you've got to work at it. You've got to be dynamic. You've got to be maybe a little outspoken. I don't think it's something that you just, throw up your hands on, because you just have to keep at it. Be a relentless advocate for your district.
Well, one of the things about American politics is that quite often these type of issues only come up at election time. And we just sort of give up for the year and a half in between election cycles, and there's not a lot being done. You've been involved in the Democratic Party in this district for a while. I mean, is there some change in the culture we could bring about so that we aren't just forgetting about things for 18 or 20 months at a time and then getting all upset about how our representatives aren't representing us?
The Democratic Party is a bottom-up organization. Most things start at the precinct level, at the district, at our district level, and move up. But what we need to do is not forget about those until election time. And I think you're talking about a culture change. In other words, be in politics 12 months out of the year. And that's what it takes. Because you don't want to, like at the last minute, right before the election, is not the time to start working. The time is to work at it steadily throughout and keep reminding people what you want to see happen. So it needs to be, we all need to think about this as a 12-month type of thing, not just the few months before the election, starting, in October or September, but work at it all year long and make sure that people know what you want, and that gives them time to work towards it.
I'm just curious, if you aren't successful in this election, you're going to continue being active in the Democratic Party?
Oh, absolutely.
So maybe we could see more activities to bring attention to these issues from the party.
I would hope so. I definitely, if I am not successful, that doesn't mean that I go home and start traveling the world. That means that I go home and there are certain things that I want to be an advocate for, no matter what my position is. So Schools, of course, is one of those. The environment's another. Making sure that we have voting rights and make sure the voting rights are not pecked away, because there is legislation right now at the U.S. Congress at the House level that will definitely hurt people voting, and it's unnecessary. And because we already have laws that provide that non-citizens don't vote, and then we've had that forever.
Well, I think the Speaker of the House has set aside that particular piece of legislation, at least in terms of tying it to the budget that they need to get passed and make sure that government doesn't shut down this week.
That would be good.
Yeah, I think they've kind of moved off on that, even though Trump was pushing for.
I still believe they do want to put that forward, but not tied with the budget.
Right. So when the House gets back into action after the election, it could still be a very big issue. But I'm glad you're bringing up voters' rights, because for me, what I've seen the last 2 years in this county in particular is chopping away at the ability of the county to be represented the way it wants to be represented. I don't think that's a partisan issue.
No,
really.
I don't think so either.
I just don't think that a lot of people are paying attention. And that's one of the things I try to do in this podcast is bring attention to issues that really aren't suitable for a small town community newspaper to dig its teeth into, because it just takes a lot of work.
It takes a lot of work, and it's one of these things that takes effort and work and stick-to-itiveness, and they probably don't have the staff for that kind of thing. I mean, small newspapers just don't. I don't see what I represent as being partisan particularly. I really think that common sense, a lot of what I represent is common sense, is what people want. Nobody wants their schools to be so pathetic that their kids come out of there and they can't make it in college if they're going to college. I mean, they need the skill set to be successful. Nobody wants kids to come out of school and high school and barely be able to manipulate the world. No.
Well, when you talk to potential voters, so have they made that connection between who their state representative is and the condition of their schools?
I try to make sure they understand that. And I think for the most part here, especially in Polk County, they're aware of it. Henderson as well, to a certain extent, because the partisan races at the school board level was not something that people really wanted. Overall, I'm not just talking about Democrats. I'm just talking people don't like that idea because it's not supposed to be partisan. It's supposed to be helping our students. You don't have to be an R or a D for that. It's just not necessary. It's not needed. It's not useful. It doesn't accomplish anything. They think it accomplishes getting more Republicans in there, but it may not. In certain, And what difference does it matter what party you are when you're talking about educating the children of this area?
Well, one would hope it shouldn't.
It shouldn't make any difference, because we all want them to walk out of there prepared for life. I mean, one of the things I used to tell my students was that when they left my class, they were going to be better able to not only take care of themselves, but their employer, because these are junior college students that oftentimes are in full-time, are working full-time and come at night. So what I was trying to push was not only taking care of yourself, but your employer, so that you become a better employee and you become better able to deal with situations that pop up in your life.
That is certainly a goal of our community colleges, for starters, and high school should be doing a little bit of that too. And I think they are. I mean, I know we have economics classes and that sort of thing to make kids just more responsible and capable when they get out of high school. And it's funny because I think a lot of people in Polk County take a lot of pride in our schools, because Polk County schools rated like 1 or 2 or 3 all the time, and stuff. So it's like, why are we worried about this? Why are we worried about making the partisan school board? Because we've just been so good for so long. My retort to that question is, well, why are we
fixing something that isn't broke.
Exactly.
Right?
Why change something that's worked really well and produced a good product for this area?
See, we're having this discussion, and it's not really going very far because we kind of agree.
We agree,
on
yeah.
this. But has there been any suggestion that you and Jake Johnson have a public debate?
The League of Women Voters tried to sponsor, this is in Hendersonville, tried to sponsor a candidate forum last Saturday. And the forum means that my opponent, Jake, would have to be there, and I would have to be there. Jake did not agree, is what they told me. So and neither did many of the other Republican candidates. Now, I can't swear to that because I only know that I was only running against Jake. But on Saturday, they had a meet and greet instead for candidates, and you could come, but your opponent and you would not have a chance to talk and express different beliefs and take questions. So that didn't happen.
Yeah, I'm really curious. Whatever happened to the candidate debates? I mean, I don't know if the national level, the presidential debates, serve a heck of a lot of a purpose anymore. But certainly at the local level, it would be great to hear you and Jake talk about the future of public education in North Carolina.
Exactly. It would be great, and I'd be thrilled. I'm ready and willing.
Okay.
And so I was there Saturday and didn't have an opponent to talk to or anybody to have anybody compare us.
Well, from the point of view of Republicans, they're heavily favored, and so public appearances really don't benefit them, right?
Well, in their way of thinking, they've already got it wrapped up.
You got any sense that think that might not be true? I mean, what's going on with Mark Robinson and his campaign is quite remarkable, and I would expect it to reflect a little bit on the Republican field in general.
I think it does reflect on the Republican field in general. I mean, I think that there needs to be an explanation about some of this activity and some of his beliefs and why these other candidates feel like they should support him, because I don't understand. It's not my moral compass that he's espousing. It's just not. I'm not comfortable with it at all as a woman, as a person of logic. I just don't get it. I mean, I know that sounds really odd, but I just don't get it. I don't understand.
And are you getting any sense in your campaigning of what the population is feeling?
Most of them are pretty appalled by Mark Robinson. I mean, I have not talked to anybody that said, "Oh, he's the best guy ever." That's not happening.
Well, but just like Trump, even his biggest supporters often say, "Well, I don't like the guy personally, but."
But they think their taxes are going to be lower, and so therefore they will put up with that. But what they don't realize is there's more than just taxes that are affected by some of his actions. And if we don't have the money to fund certain things in the government, they don't get done. And that includes education, health care, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. All those things are important. That's our way of life. And it's very important to most Americans to have those things in place.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up because that's a nice summary of a political philosophy.
Okay.
So thanks very much.
You're more than welcome. Absolutely. Enjoyed it.
All right.
Thank you.
Again, I think we should all be appreciative that there's a Democrat on the ballot this year. You can compare Michelle's approach to governance to Jake's by listening to my interview with him a few months ago. Just scroll back about 17 episodes. And by the way, after my interview with Michelle, I did email Jake to see if he still stood by Mark Robinson, but he never got back to me. In the next episode of Folklore, I talk with U.S. House District 11 candidate Caleb Rudo, who, like Michelle Antalec, is facing a tough fight to unseat the incumbent, in this case Republican Chuck Edwards. Beginning next year, thanks again to the inventive border drawing of the North Carolina Republican Party, U.S. District 11 will only include the northern and westernmost portions of Polk County. So I'll understand if you skip that one if you live in Columbus, Tryon, or Green Creek, which are now part of District 14. Of course, I still think the interview will be worth your time. And don't worry, after that, I've got an interview with the Democratic candidate for your district, Pam Janad. so you'll be covered either way. You can always reach me with your comments by emailing jamesh@folklore.com. And thanks for listening.